Hey, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for coming to the panel. This is going to be a really, really interactive panel. And what's really cool about the panelists I put together, and they're going to introduce themselves, is one comes from a product, right? So a technology that allows you to, upload your video and then share your video. An enterprise, someone who actually creates video and shares it with an internal and external audience. And one person who's all about the delivery. So it's an independent production company studio that goes out and encodes. Three things that are really important. So you get the entire gamut of the entire space, which is really cool. And so I wanted to start this off as, when I got into streaming in 1999, the first streaming event that I ever did was for Kenneth Cole, and was a fashion show. And Kenneth Cole got up on stage and he told a quick little story. He told a story about a guy he knew who was driving home from work one day, and his wife called him from home, and she was watching the news, and there seemed to be a guy on the New Jersey Turnpike going the wrong direction. And when she calls her husband to tell him to get off the New Jersey Turnpike on the way home, he answers his cell phone, if there was cell phones in 1999, and said to his wife, "It's worse than that. It's not one guy going the wrong direction, everyone's going in the wrong direction." Which basically means that, hey, you know what? Streaming, what you're doing, it's not about how everyone thinks they're doing it. No one has perfected this. This is something that's new. No one knows exactly what your audience is going to want to receive and how they're going to want to receive it. And whether they're going to want it in big pieces, whether they're going to want it in small pieces, whether they want long form, or is the webinar and didactic dead? Nobody knows. Only your audience knows. So my only advice when you think about this session is, what do I have to do to create content to deliver to my target audience? So let's go right in order. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves for a couple minutes, and then we'll get right into some questions.
Great. Hi, I'm Anjali Sood. I lead marketing and the creator tools business at Vimeo. For those who don't know Vimeo, we are an ad-free video platform. We provide tools for creators, businesses, publishers, media partners to upload, share, sell their work to audiences worldwide. Some stats about Vimeo: we have over 280 million monthly users, over 700,000 paying subscribers using our creator tools, and over 1.2 million viewers who are paying to consume content on our platform.
Wow. Scott?
I'm Scott Szczurek. I do video at CME Group, which is based in Chicago. It's the world's largest and most diverse futures and options exchange. So we're a financial firm. We are also global. We're based in Chicago, but we also have exchanges and partnerships in Korea, Singapore, here in New York, and in London. And basically, my department oversees creation of video. On the one end, we do broadcast content. So when CNBC or Fox or Reuters are doing content from the trading floors, we're producing that, all the way through the public video space out to the enterprise side. So our small department literally touches every piece of video content that gets produced, whether it's internal or whether it's broadcast on the air. And that includes a lot of meat in the middle for our public-facing web content.
And I'm Scott Farb, CEO of StreamVPG. We're an independent video production group with a studio here in New York, and we work worldwide. So lights, camera, action, and coding. We like to say we do as much or as little as needed to help the clients produce that event. So everything from just an encoding tech that goes out to a 10-camera live switch video feed for both webcasting, hybrids events, or even broadcast events.
All right, so I'm going to ask you first question. Why did you get into space? And what's the biggest changes you've seen over the last 24 months?
Sure. So before Vimeo, I actually spent most of my career at Amazon. And so I was in the e-commerce world. And I think what was so fascinating to me about video is that kind of what e-commerce went through 10 years ago, marketers everything is becoming about content. And the OTT ecosystem is unbundling. And it's basically a really exciting time to be a content creator. And for me, Vimeo has sort of, we pride ourselves on having the world's best creator community, and so the opportunity to work on behalf of that community at a time when creators are getting more control, more options to monetize their content and earn a living from their work was just really exciting.
Scott?
I originally got into, like I said, when I got into the space, we were doing mostly broadcast video. And I've kind of seen the entire ecosystem of online video grow through the space of essentially one enterprise. And it's very interesting to have seen that. I think in the past 2 years or so, the most interesting thing that's happened in our space is we were often in the past producing informational or teaser content that had very micro-targeted audiences. And this was content that by and large lived in spaces that we had control over. So it was on our website or our YouTube channel or let's say partner sites that we were syndicating to. What we've seen really over the past couple years, and I would say especially the past 12 months, is that the tight level of control that an enterprise might have wanted to keep over its content or video sort of exploded because of all the places that video is seen at this point. And the fact that our enterprise, you don't always have control over the context of a piece you create, or even specifically in terms of micro-targeting who you're getting to. So I think the most interesting thing we've seen is that has drawn us back into producing content that is broadly appealing, so that when we accidentally find a viewer, which happens more often than not lately, we have content that appeals to them and not a super segmented group.
Scott?
So I've been in the space since 1999. It doesn't sound like that long, but 17 years. I had black hair and all those fun things. We were streaming at 14 4K, and it was crazy. I got into the space by accident, and a friend asked me to help them out with something, and I got involved, and away it went. So came from the platform side and just saw how the business was changing. And in regards to that, what's going on in the past 24 months, what we've seen, and what we created the company because what we've seen is platforms are changing, everything's changing, but clients are still looking for the same thing. They're looking for a good experience for the end user. They're looking for it to be easy for their internal teams and all of those things. So I've seen it change from audio webcasting to video webcasting to now people doing live OTT and all kinds of things. It's just about creating content and delivering it to the client in all different fashions. There's no one way anymore. It's not just a webcast. It's how do you deliver it to YouTube Live or an OTT channel or the webcast, CPE credits. It's not one platform fits all. It's now how do you deliver it in all these different fashions to engage the client and let them deliver it to all of their users.
And if anyone has questions at any time, don't wait to the end. Just stand up. I will see you, and you can jump into the conversation to keep it open. But I want to start with the inception of content. So we're talking the production, the quality of content. In Vimeo's experience, over the last couple of years, has production values gone up? Have they gone down? Is it more about how much content I can create? I mean, what have you seen? What's the trend?
Yeah, so I think in our experience, it's been a mix depending on the type of content you're looking to produce. But what we're seeing is what used to be traditionally, you'd go to just an agency or a studio, you'd have like a really formal RFP process and there are very long lead times. I think people need a lot more flexibility because the types of content that they're creating are changing and they're working on much faster lead times. And so what we've seen is more companies going with in-house production studios or some version of an in-house team that can then work with an external studio. And we've also seen a lot more multimedia campaigns.
Right.
So what used to just be, a video is a video. Now it's much more about what's my content marketing strategy overall. Here's my target audience, and here's what I need to communicate to them. Let me do it via a video and blog post and a microsite and interactive elements, and let me build a broader campaign around it so I can get maximum reach and syndication.
So the days of just creating content and plopping it on my website or uploading it into YouTube and letting the world come to it, they're over?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is similar to kind of what you said about, it used to be that's what you would do. You would just say, okay, this is the piece of content and here's where I want it to go. Well, A, you can't control that as much anymore, and B, that's an opportunity to build a campaign that has a lot more reach and then drive all of that reach back to your home base.
That's very interesting. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of those sentiments. I think the specific thing that we've seen is on the production side, it's becoming more and more important that we be building brand with every piece of content.
Right.
And it's an interesting divergence where you want to be producing something that is sort of, you no longer want hyper-technical content or something that might only reach, let's say, in our case, there are occasions where a piece of video content that's teasing a specific product, the end number of clients on that product could be 50. And for that reason, knowing that you are ultimately trying to reach more people than that, every piece of content becomes a piece of brand, even as the message might start to diverge more from the core content that helped generate the piece. So it's an interesting challenge involved with the production of every piece of content, and keeping that brand consistency is really important so that in all of the non-obvious ways, people feel that they're watching content from the same
And do you
producer.
create content differently for your different audiences? Because in your organization, you have very many different audiences.
Yeah, so just without going into detail, I think this is something a lot of people have experienced. We let's say, we have product segments, so we might be reaching out by product segment. We also have platform, and there are not only restrictions on let's say, the length of video you can produce for a specific format, but there's also the viewing habits of the person on that particular medium. So, and beyond that, our brand is a very diverse brand that has, satellites and educational initiatives built off of it. So, there are a lot of different tracks going on at the same time.
So it's not one size fits all, right? So advice to the audience is know your end audience, create content for them. And some could be long form, some might be short form. Absolutely. And so then this leads me to the next side of the question, live or on demand? I mean, what's more important? Is live dead? Is live as important as it was before? Scott?
It's all about the content. So, if it's an HR meeting and they're announcing a new pay plan and all that, live is the most important thing in the world. If it's, educational things or things like that, it's on demand. They're both exploding. And just to go back 1 second, we see 3 prongs. The self-service, webcam, all of that, it's exploding, it's cheap, it's easy, they can get it out really quickly. The second prong is that kind of down and dirty, one camera and encoder, and away you go for, again, mid-level things that you want to get out really quickly. But there's still that large, high production value events, a product rollout when you're customer facing, CEO meetings, things like that. They're all exploding because it's much easier to deliver and it's better quality now.
I mean, Vimeo's not a traditionally a live platform. Eventually, I'm going to assume maybe you're going to come out with a live version?
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, live and on demand, both exploding. We are about supporting creators in whatever use case that they're focused on creating content. So while we don't have anything to announce today about live streaming, we are absolutely working on how best to support it in Vimeo.
And so saying about that, are we excited that Amazon's getting into the YouTube space? I mean, is that a good thing? I mean, I'm going to assume for Vimeo it's a great thing, right? It's just if I create a video and I put it in Vimeo, I am going to also put it there, right?
Yeah, so I think for Vimeo, we have an on-demand platform. We're very focused, and we just actually announced an acquisition with VHX, which is a OTT subscription platform. And I think what we're seeing is, and again, it's very exciting for content creators, is they now have a very diversified way to monetize. And as a result, they can get really strategic about windowing opportunities. And so, I think from Vimeo's perspective, we want Vimeo on demand to be, the first window of choice because there's more powerful economics, et cetera. But we also think it's better for creators in the long term to have lots of different options to be able to earn money on their content. So I think it's great for the ecosystem overall.
Are you doing a lot of live?
Yeah, so we still do a fair amount of live. To your point, there are use cases where live is the most appropriate. And I think, so there's a couple things on our side. One, in my opinion, live is often about interactivity, but it's about the interactivity by and large, being experienced by the presenter. If your presenter is not in need of that immediate feedback or that immediate interaction, whether something is live or virtually live is a big difference. So a lot of the content we produce involves the markets. It involves activity in the markets and what trade is most appropriate for this particular moment. So that's content that's extraordinarily timely. At the same time, that's not necessarily content that needs to be live. And it's not the type of thing where there are trade-offs with production value and there's risk involved with live. And I think that one interesting point on this note is for the individual enterprise or company, it's important not to necessarily reach out into every avenue that is available to you or that might get you viewership if you don't have the type of content that's truly going to engage your audience in that area. So I can, for example, Facebook live streaming is a space where the right event on Facebook live streaming can become massively popular in a very short amount of time. Now, that very short amount of time is not that short of an amount of time. It takes some time for that to build. So I think that it's another interesting thing is as all of these avenues open up for you to get your content out there, you do need to know your audience well enough not to reach into one that may not be appropriate for your content because the viewer will see through that.
And I also think as an enterprise, you have to be committed that if you're going to go down this road, you got to keep on filling the well with content. You can't do an event today and not talk to that audience the same way for 60, 90, 120 days. So it's a huge commitment on your side to say, we're going to keep on creating content. And do we have enough content that's going to engage our audience? Which leads back to when I got into streaming in the late 90s, it was all about content, but it was 28K and 56K, so it really wasn't a great user experience. Then all of a sudden, over the last 8 or 9 years, we spent all this time trying to build the best technology and building the best pipes. And finally, the technology and the pipes are there, but people forgot that content's king. You got to have good content. And it amazes me how many people do conferences and yet they don't capture their sessions. And if that person's worthy enough to bring in and speak in front of a live audience, why aren't they worthy enough to put on demand? And that leads me to, if we're going to create our content on demand, how important is call to action and interactivity and ability to forward and share it? And why don't we start with you?
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Yeah, I know, I'm lucky. So I think the theme that we've been talking about here is that there's no one-size-fits-all content, and there's lots of different types of audiences and types of content that works. And so as a result, when it comes to things like interactivity and calls to action, I think what we see at Vimeo is, our users they want full and total control and customization in every way, right? Whether that's chapters and forms, whether that's CTA customization, and then I think, so it's the tools to truly customize your content based on the platform of the audience. Then I think the other piece is just analytics. As you said, you gotta really invest in content over the long term, which means you also need to be able to measure the results of that and make sure your campaigns are effective. And so just having really advanced analytics that lets you understand if your campaigns are working, how many users you brought in, what they're doing, what the ultimate ROI is on that campaign, is sort of the other piece that I think is really important.
So Scott, what's your ROI in general when you're doing a program?
So this is actually, campaign success is a very interesting thing to try to touch on because I think generally in the space, what everybody has seen is that more and more people are watching content. Less and less people are watching ad content, strictly ad content. And that is a huge opportunity for getting eyeballs on the stuff you're creating because you're no longer necessarily micro-targeting a segment. You might accidentally stumble on an audience. At the same time, it does add a tremendous challenge in actually noting what your success metric is at the end of the day. Is your success metric the number of people that have viewed it? Is it conversion to sales? Is it lead generation? And all of those things require additional interactivity or calls to action or things like that. Now, this has been a tremendous challenge for us because we know that on an individual viewer basis, we are not going to know, and it's getting harder to know, what device or platform someone's going to be encountering your content on, or even if someone's going to be encountering that piece of content on a single device for that entire piece of content. And for that reason, those interactive elements, let's say built into the players, are a tremendous challenge because you don't know how they're going to interact with those on, let's say, a mobile device versus their iPad, versus, let's say, OTT, where there's no way to click on the click here button. So I would say that our biggest challenge at this point is saying, okay, we can massively increase the number of people that are viewing content, but at the end of the day, if we haven't generated a lead or if we haven't seen a direct conversion to sales, is that success? And that's an important question.
And do you have to have some sort of call to action in your video?
I mean, my personal opinion is that the less control you have over where somebody sees it or the context they see it in, the more you need to somehow draw them back to something else. The challenge of how to do that is complicated.
Okay. Scott, any thoughts?
I think that call to action is really important, be it the ability for someone to ask those questions in a live event or e-learning or anything like that. You have to give somebody a reason to watch that content, be it, again, timely information or that call to action or whatever it is. So I think that goes back to the key. We're not talking about YouTube watching a music video.
Right.
We're talking about the enterprise here, the reason to create that video. So I think that is the most important thing.
And ROI is just not about the quantity of people. It's how to use it, and where they use it, and what do they do with it. And I'm a big believer of the power of one. So if anyone asks anyone in this room to be on their podcast or to speak at a conference, don't ever think about it as how big's the audience going to be, where am I going to reach it, because all you need is one person out there to either want to maybe buy your company, you want one person that wants to invest, use your services, but no one's going to know you're doing it unless you reach out to it. And every organization has to come back and go, what is our ROI? Is it quantity? Is it sales? Is it push through? Is it forwards? Is it shares? What is it going to be? And it's something to think about as you're creating. Besides, so we started off, you have to create decent quality video, right? So make sure that it's clear and people can hear you and it's lit okay and you get the message out there. And then you have to figure out where you're going to host it, which kind of leads me to OTT, right? So I'm a huge believer that every single corporation in America is going to have an OTT channel, like a Roku channel. I believe it is going to be part of the mix. Why can't I watch on an 80-inch television? And what I tell everyone, when I got into streaming in 1999, the only reason we didn't deliver to TV is because we couldn't deliver to a TV. It was the only place we could deliver was to computers and laptops. And then it was easier to deliver it to iPhones and smart devices. And now I have the ability to deliver anywhere. And as Scott mentioned, yeah, but I've kind of lost that second screen ability if I put it into an OTT environment. Are we finding in the world of Vimeo, and I know you just took a place in the OTT world, that people want to be able to syndicate their content no matter where? And are they changing their content based on the devices going in, or are they still going, one size is going to fit all the devices?
Yeah, so I think on the first part, yes, absolutely. I think people want to distribute their content across, and I with VHX, they have a great ability to create white label, OTT platforms and mobile apps and connected TV devices, et cetera. So I think that's just going to continue to develop, and there'll be more options there. On the question of creating content for devices.
Yep.
I actually would say what I see more and more now is because of the nuances around viewing content on a mobile device and viewing content in native social feeds where, for example, it's auto playing, you're not actually hearing audio. I'm actually seeing a lot of content production is being from the get-go designed to be mobile first without audio so they can play in feeds. And so really, people are heavily leaning into designing content that's optimized for those environments. And so instead of having multiple different kinds, because otherwise, the scalability of producing the content starts to get a little crazy.
Scott?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things to look at when you're thinking about your audience is you do have to think, where is somebody going to be interacting with this, and what is their expectation in that particular platform? And certainly on the enterprise side, we see that specific challenge, which is, can we truly create 5 different versions of the same content to match people in all those different areas? In a lot of cases, or in some cases, you simply can't. But I think the most important thing right now with the massive amount of content that is being produced, it's just an exploding amount of content coming from every direction, is you have to be very careful that you don't completely turn someone off of engaging with your content on a specific platform. So that requires a lot of thought of it almost turns the tables. Maybe it is more effective to have an extremely complicated and intensive means of producing, let's say, OTT-specific content, just so that I don't seem like I'm trying to move into this space without having really thought about the way my audience was going to engage with it.
Well, and Scott, in your world, when they come to you and they want you to deliver it, they're expecting it to be beautiful in every environment that you're going to send it to. So what are your challenges, and what are you seeing?
Well, yes and no. There's a certain portion of the people that understand where they want it delivered. They're doing CPE credits, and that's on traditionally on a laptop or on a desktop, and you're taking a test and you're getting that credit. Nowadays they'll also extend that out to OTT and those things. So, from our perspective, it doesn't change a lot. Technology is technology. It's now trying to optimize that and use the right gear and equipment to be able to get it to those places. So, be it different encoders, different things like that. For a live event, you still have the same lights, the same cameras, the same things. You're just now sending it to different places. You might be cutting in slides to deliver it for OTT and put slides next to it for delivering it to a laptop and things like that. So understanding where those avenues are and delivering it correctly is really the key of what we see going on out there.
Do you still see are clients scared of live, doing live, remote live, not studio live? Studio live, we're going to assume you have it perfected, or in my office or in my company, we're good in our studio. But is live growing and growing, and is there still a fear of broadcasting from the Hilton in New York City?
There better be a fear of doing it. That's why I have gray hair. There are so many things that can go wrong with live if you really don't know what you're doing. And if you do know what you're doing and you deliver it correctly, the payback is huge. That interaction, when you can have a CEO here in this room and broadcasting to 100 offices around the world and getting live questions back, and that interaction in a great way is a really powerful tool. You do something wrong and there are 80 steps along the way, it fails, and it fails huge. So they are scared. That's why they bring in professionals to do those live events and to do it correctly. But again, when it's done correctly, it's great.
I mean, just on this note, I would say that there's one specific aspect of production for these different platforms that is really important, and that is duration, which is how long is someone used to watching something on this specific thing. So all production value aside, and the core of your content aside, you can make the assumption that people are coming to you because they want to see your content, which is not an assumption you can always be making.
Right.
But that is a giant difference, which is that there are certain platforms where it's harder to cascade from one piece of content to the next. And short form content is not as friendly on those because it requires a person to come in and intervene and actively decide to watch another piece, for example. So I'm not saying there's a magic bullet solution to this because it is a tremendous challenge on the enterprise side, but the fact that you are dealing with audiences that are simultaneously used to watching 15 or 30-second videos on one platform and more accustomed to watching, let's say, 30 to 60-minute pieces on a television set is a giant challenge.
Any opinions on this?
Just wholeheartedly agree. We also, I wouldn't say we've cracked the code on that. Again, it goes back to the idea of like for us, holistic campaigns. And so whenever we're trying to deliver a certain message, we do try and say, okay, well, here's what we need to convey. And then we will have like the small 15, 30-second sort of snackable sizes of that content, and then the longer form pieces. And the way we typically think of it is like a lot of the shorter form stuff is what we use to push out from a syndication perspective. And then when we're trying to drive users back to our home base at Vimeo, that's where a lot of the longer form stuff lives.
Well, in your world, when you create video and people watch it, and now I'm interested in this topic, do you follow up with more content for them? And how fast do you follow up with me after I watch something in general? And any advice that's worked and hasn't worked?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so generally, in terms of that cross-platform thing, we like to think of it as it being a spectrum where you go from one point with the shortest form to the longest point. And it's also important to keep in mind that at that longest point of content is still the point where you're able to provide all of that supplementary information that back when you were just posting video on a website was always already there. So you already had, let's say, your sales material, or you had your contact button. You already had that on a web page. And the question is how to get someone from a space, and I mean, video-wise, we can go all the way down to Instagram or Snapchat and cascade them through these different platforms in a way where they're finding something new at each different step and hopefully getting to the point where there's that further level of context. So the real challenge at this point is it used to be that video was a great tool to tease a piece of web content. Right. And was a great way to, let's say, when they clicked the video, they had to create a login to watch video on your page, and you immediately had a lead generated. To get people into an environment where that type of thing is possible or not completely unpleasant for the user, takes sometimes a trip through a lot of different places that have very different and more snackable forms of content.
All right. So just as a little segue, let's talk audio. So it seems like podcasts are the hottest things again. They're back, right? And I kind of believe it's because when people commute or they're at the gym and they don't have internet connection, they want to be able to download it. But on Vimeo, I know there's a lot of audio-only content. Have we seen, is it increasing, decreasing, is staying about the same?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, for us, it seems like podcasts are back.
Right.
We actually have our own Vimeo podcast that we just launched a few months ago in response to sort of that trend, and we've seen a lot of engagement. So yeah, I think it's been, I would say, similar percentage of our content is still audio focused.
I mean, it makes, and if you're going to create audio content, you might as well syndicate it on Vimeo, you might as well syndicate it on YouTube, you might as well put it everywhere. Why wouldn't you do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's,
and I think that goes back to the overall, you know, if you're a content creator, whether it's audio or video, you have more options and you should use those options. You know, and every platform offers different pros and cons, and I don't think you want to be in an either or environment where you're only exclusively going
is
with
CME
one.
Group creating audio content?
So CME Group creates a limited amount of audio content, but I think another area where this is really crucial is, per Anjali's point, you know, there's certain content that you need to have a very strong visual element because people might not hear the audio. The fact that people multitask also often means that people aren't seeing the visual element. So even on the purely video basis, audio becomes incredibly crucial because you don't know that anyone is actually actively watching the visual part of the content.
Have any of you guys experimented with, you know, Periscope or, you know, Instagram video, Snapchat video, and do you think it's viable for the enterprise?
I mean, on our side, I can say yes, we are starting to do that right now. And I do think there are ways that that's viable for us. Again, a lot of this isn't, for all the things that we're not able to know about our specific viewers or our specific followers in terms of demographics or things like that, the one thing we do know is that if we're reaching a user on a specific platform, we know what their expectation of the platform is. And I think it's very strong in our mind not to be overly invasive and not to be producing essentially pop-up ads that appear in your Snapchat story, but at the same time, be able to provide the most snackable version of content, so hopefully somebody reaches out and finds you on a platform where there's more information.
Scott, are people coming to you for crazy ways or places they want to start delivering their video content?
They are, I mean, we deliver it everywhere. So, I mean, we've seen from Facebook Live now to Periscope and all different events, audio, you name it, the gamut. And, you know, it all depends on the content and the audience that they're looking for. You know, the enterprise internal is a completely different audience than the Periscope, you know, Facebook Live, that type of audience. But that doesn't mean that some of the content can go both places or, you know, picking and choosing where you want to deliver it. And that's the whole idea is as we keep growing the you know, appliances to be able to deliver it to, you have to at least try it and see, because you never know where your audience is going to be. And
your audience isn't stupid. So you've got to create good content no matter what. You might get me to come once, but if it's not a compelling user experience for me, I don't think I'm ever coming back. That's, to me, the biggest risk of any enterprise starting to do video. If you create bad content, you're going to lose me. I'm never coming back, you know, so.
Yeah. And actually, I think for a lot of companies who are thinking about video content, there's often this push to like move quickly and get as much out as possible. And it's like, okay, if I can just increase the number of videos out there or my frequency, that's what's going to drive results. And I mean, we've seen no correlation between, you know, effectiveness and just number of videos. It really is about the quality.
The time is finally here.
I should also note that the reason we're able to use, let's say, Snapchat or Instagram is because we deal with live markets. Right. So there's a reason someone would want to be seeing our content maybe repeatedly in real time or update on a moving market. I don't know that that's something that we would be using if we didn't know that our audience wanted to be getting updates from us. So we have the exact same concerns, which is there are so many options available out there about how to get to people. The last thing you want to do is, although this is ironic, brand yourself as someone who's constantly trying to sell someone something, because content is going in exactly the opposite direction the hard sell.
So we have this great panel. We have a few minutes left. You guys have any questions for these guys?
For Scott from CME, because I feel like we might do similar work, because I work with United Way, so we have multiple audiences, multiple services that we offer. So when looking at your audiences, do you just take the time to know each individual one, or do you target the largest and then segment from there?
So United Way wants, and I got to repeat the question so it gets on the stream. United Way wants to know, how do you target your audiences?
So the way our group works is our group basically serves internal clients when we're producing content, and we advise on, whether it's scripts or storyboards or anything like that. So we're the content producers, but we are serving internal clients. And it's been something we've been doing much, much more over the past year to say to everybody who comes to us with a request, specifically who is your audience, how many people are they, and where is it that you want to reach them. And there are cases where then out of that content coming, let's say, out of product groups, we see that there's something there that could be more broadly appealing and move it upwards. So things kind of come to us from both directions. In one sense, there's a brand campaign that comes from the top down, but there's also a way to elevate content sometimes.
Right. So where Scott has external clients, Scott at CME, you have all these internal clients who are coming to you and they just expect that you're going to deliver it? I mean,
well, this is another thing. It's certainly been the case for more than the past 2 years, but right now, everybody considers video to be in a... It used to be nice if I could get a video on my page, but now video is this essential, absolutely essential tool in doing that. And I think that it's also important to level set expectations, let's say for us and our internal client, but also for ourselves to know that for this piece of content, when we see 140 views on it, that is not mission failure, that may be mission accomplished. And there's no way to do that unless you can get the people you're producing video for thinking about what their success metric is.
cool. Next question?
Yeah, when creating content that can be understood without hearing it, do you think we should be going the route of like uploading an SRT file with closed captions or doing font on screen?
All right, I can't even repeat that question, but that is definitely a question for you.
Yeah, I think, I know we keep saying this, I think it just depends on the type of content and the audience. So I always use the example of Tasty. Have you guys seen their
Yes.
their Facebook videos? Like, you don't need closed captioning for that video.
Nope.
Right? It's super compelling with no audio. You are going to watch that whole thing, and it totally works for that need. Now, if you have, we have a video school, Vimeo Video School, where we have very long form content. We're trying to provide a lot of educational information about gear and techniques, and that's an example where, for us, we probably do need sort of closed captioning or some other supplemental communication form to get the info across.
Tasty's a great example. All right. Yep.
So when you say that every company is going to have an OTT channel, what type of content do you expect to be filling that channel, and where is that channel going to be distributed?
All right, so my vision on it, and the panel might disagree, is I think every company will have those 3 channels, right? One is their internal channel. Just because if my executive wants to watch on his 80-inch television at home, or his laptop, or in his office, or on his iPhone, that's great. I just want to reach my audience where they are. One is we'll call it the B2B. So if I'm a corporation, I have my vendors and my partners, or people I want to educate about my company, they're going to have that channel. And that channel might be, where the first one is very much a permission-based channel. Second channel is, hey, if I give you username and password, you can watch this. And again, want to watch on an 80-inch television? Great for you. And then I think everyone's going to have some sort of consumer-facing. And if you really go down that road, and let's just use this as an example, if I'm Mercedes-Benz, I would have 3 channels, right? I'd have my channel where I educate the dealers, and only people who watch it are dealers. Then I would have my channel for the employees of Mercedes-Benz, and then I'd have the consumer channel. But the consumer channel is not going to be 24-hour car. It's going to be content that I know Mercedes drivers and buyers are going to want to watch. And that's going to be maybe aggregated content, maybe original content. But I think that's where it's going. I think where they're going to start is they'll start with an internal channel, then they'll do a customer-facing channel, and then they'll do sort of a consumer channel. But it's, first of all, and where do I think it's going to go? I'm going to say places like Roku, and the only reason I say Roku is because Roku is probably the easiest place to create an OTT channel today. You could do it on Samsung, on smart TVs. You can do it on Amazon Fire. You could do it on, the list goes on. But, you can go home right now and go to Instant Channel, and you can have an OTT channel in 30 minutes. Doesn't mean you can have the hosting for it. Doesn't mean it's going to build an audience, but you can have it. And the other cool part about OTT, it was built for pay-per-view, right? So now I have the ability to make it permission-based. Doesn't mean I have to charge, but I can if I want. So that's where I think it's going. And again, if I could have a viewing party with my employees in the conference room on the big screen monitor, that's much better than a Keystone projector with a laptop and a stream going into it. And as a CEO of a company, if I could sit at home and watch in my living room, that's great too. So that's my opinion. I don't know where the panel feels on this, but.
So, I mean, I agree, and it's going to be that combination of on-demand and
Yep.
live, so it'll probably start mostly on-demand, but going live, be it that town hall meeting, be it, Mercedes-Benz sponsors sporting events and things like that. Why not, send that to your OTT channel and build your own? I mean, isn't that what Red Bull did?
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull's a media company that makes money selling a beverage, right? And another cool part about it is I could be global instantly, and that's anybody could be watching it. There's no barriers, outside of hosting and delivery. And I think you have a question?
All right, so I work for Department of Defense, and we have all the public-facing, public affairs content, defense media activity.
Yep.
And so we have a Herculean task. So we do everything from broadcast television live to canned 15-second segments. And we have an audience that crosses all demographics that you can imagine and is global. What is a good strategy? Because, we're looking at a mobile first approach.
Right.
Because of our content for deployed people, those kind of things, everybody's got a device. So the question is, though, getting the American public. So, we have veterans that we reach out to,
Yep.
we have active service members, we have family members, and then we have foreign nations that actually want to know more about what we're doing, humanitarian-wise, not just militarily.
Right.
We do a lot of things. So with that challenge, with that internal and external audiences, you guys got
Any advice,
brand
guys?
awareness, that kind of, because that's why I kind of came, this
No.
title is customer awareness and loyalty,
Scott?
because they have different customers.
I mean, the first thing I would say from our perspective is it was a major challenge to get us away from the direction of wanting people to know from the very first second that we were the ones providing them the piece of content we were providing them. So all these sort of social forms of syndication, places you can put your videos and other places to contextualize them. From our perspective, what we do is we actually syndicate a huge amount of content to client firms. We produce a large amount of content, and on occasion, this segment of content is applicable to, let's say, this partner. So that content is found via that partner's site. No one necessarily immediately knows that's us. There's a bumper or something. If you can contextualize that video in terms of your brand at the, let's say, beginning and end, so that eventually someone knows you produced it, and you maintain a way to track the analytics on it, what we have done at least is each of those individual segments, just make sure your metadata is healthy enough so you're micro-targeting the people who are looking for that, and build sub-brands beneath your brand to syndicate it. I mean, that's what we would do.
And then awareness. How am I going to know where it is?
So we have many, I'm sorry, I'm just asking.
No, that's
this is a big
great.
conundrum. So we have tons of channels. We have tons of, we're doing exactly what you said. We're dumping content into every avenue, but we cannot monetize it because we're the government, right? So there's no way to really drive things because, honestly, it's information that we just kind of park, and you guys addressed that a little bit earlier.
Right.
You can't just park information anymore. People aren't looking for it; they expect it to be driven to them. And so it's really hard for us to be able to drive content because we can't monetize it,
Right.
which is what drives everything.
We should take this one offline and continue.
I apologize.
No, we have 2 minutes left, and we have a question in the back. Or it might be an answer to your question.
It's a little bit of both. So I work for a university, and we're a video production department within the university that creates high-quality products for promotional reasons, commercials, things of that nature. But we don't monetize. The thing we've been challenged with lately is the end-user experience. We have to come up with creative ways to see whether the messaging or the communication
website where the call to action can be taken care of at that point. We're using social media to sub-brand ourselves. So we're on set shooting something, we'll do a production still and float it on Instagram and tag people and tweet that out. We'll shoot a little bit of video, put that on Facebook, do the same thing. And that all seems to help in building up anticipation for the final piece, but I still haven't cracked the code to know how effective messaging is. There's analytics on Vimeo, there is certain feedback and response on other social media channels, but has anybody thought about another way to get the results of your work without, if you can't charge for it?
Yeah, I think, so when we at Vimeo on the marketing side, we do the same thing. We invest a lot in content that we don't necessarily monetize. And the KPIs that we tend to look at is, you're right, it's not just like how many people watched the video or how many people did I drive back to my home channel, but we do try sort of our internal analytics as a company. We try and track of those users that then watch the video, what did they then go on to do? And how does that compare to people that didn't watch this content? So for example, what we've seen in Vimeo is like when we invest in creating a lot of really good educational content, those users have higher retention. So they tend to stay on our platform longer. And we can, ultimately we can tie a number to that and say, okay, the retention of a user is worth X to us. And therefore that's kind of how we've been getting to ROI.
Great answer. All right, so last question, and then we're out of time. And of course, we'll stay up here and answer any questions anyone has. But what's your question, sir?
Just a quick question. You noticed that unless we have sent out the invites to a live stream, the participation for an enterprise event is very low. So I want to ask Scott, what do you sort of suggest in terms of creating the awareness internally? Is it like, should we create like a small 15 to 30 second clip prior to the event or some sort of other way to sort of create awareness? But that's the challenge that we've been having, is that not many people, unless they're economic calendar, would want to go out to the live stream. We put a lot of effort into putting a live stream together. So.
And can I ask you a question on top of that? Is it a series of events? Or do you do an event this month and maybe not another one for 6 months? Or do you know that you're going to have these 6 events over the next 6, 7 months?
Well, we have events all the time, like internally, like there are events every week. So sometimes it's a president forum, sometimes it's a conference that we are doing for internal audience, sometimes we're going to get speakers coming on campus. So there's a lot of events that go on.
Is there a place I can go to when I see the list of events where I can click and have it send me reminders when the event is in advance? Or while I'm watching one event that you promote, can I sign up for other events? But I'll let the panel.
So I mean, from what I've seen, a tremendous amount of this has to do with the content. So if you're doing CME, CPE credits, you're going to get people to show up because they're getting something for it.
Yeah, but if they don't know about the event, they're not going to show, right?
Well, but he's talking about people that actually sign up for it and then don't show up, correct?
Okay.
So for those people, they show up because they're getting credit. If it's the CEO talking and you can actually interact, I mean, I always say if you're doing a live event and there's a CEO, CFO, if you don't take live Q&A from the audience here in the room and the virtual audience, why is that virtual audience showing up at that day at that time? But if you take those questions and bring them in and are able to engage that way, you're going to get a larger participation. You got to remember, in the enterprise, I'm going to sign up for it, and then I have a sales call that came in between me signing up and there that's more important than that content. So you're going to have loss from that. It's just making sure that your content is that engaging and having things on it that make that person want to be there at that time. You also then have to look at how many of those people that signed up for the live event came back and watched the on-demand event because something came up during their day, and factor that into your
And do you remind them?
equation.
Do you remind them like an hour before or 2 hours before the event? Because I sign up for things all the time and I don't show up because I forget that they're there. Even if they're in my calendar, I forget if they're there without an email. But that's a really good point. Do you track how many people come back? It's important. And then just to end, because we're out of time, I want to thank, this was an incredible panel. I'm impressed with all you guys, and thank you for your time.